The smoke rose before I even smelled it. A thin, black column twisting up from beyond the tree line, cutting into the pale dawn sky like a warning flare. My boots were still muddy from the night's rain as I stepped off the porch. The air was damp, silent except for the distant caw of a crow, and that acrid smell of something burning. My stomach sank. It wasn't just a bonfire. I jogged toward the field, every step sinking slightly in the wet earth. The closer I got, the more I felt the heat in the air. My corn barn, the old timber frame structure that had stood since my grandfather's day, was fully ablaze. Flames roared like a living thing, devouring the walls, sending sparks skyward as if mocking me. I didn't yell. I didn't panic. My pulse slowed. Because this wasn't an accident. 2 sets of tire tracks cut across the edge of my property, pressed deep into the mud. And standing there, like she was proud of it, was Karen Lockridge, president of the Maple Hills HOA, arms crossed, a smug little smirk on her face. "Morning, John," she called, as if she were commenting on the weather. Figured this old eyesore needed to go. Consider it community improvement. I didn't answer her. I just stared at the barn as it collapsed inward, the roof giving way with a loud crack. Karen wore that smug powersuit suburban warriors love, khaki slacks, bright floral blouse, and a clipboard tucked under her arm like it was a badge. Her platinum hair was too perfect for someone standing in a field at sunrise. "You can't just," I started, but she cut me off. "Oh, I can," she said cheerfully. HOA bylaws clearly state that all structures must meet community standards. Your barn," she actually used air quotes, "was an agricultural nuisance. Rats, fire hazard, and frankly an eyesore. We voted last night. Majority rules. You burned it down." My voice was low now. Controlled. "Better for everyone this way," she said with a shrug. "You'll thank me later." She turned to leave, completely unbothered, like she hadn't just committed arson in broad daylight. I watched her go. Watched her SUV tires chew fresh ruts into my field. And then I pulled my phone out, not to dial 911, no, that would have been too easy, but to snap photos. Tracks flames. The smirk on her face as she got into her car. By the time the fire department showed up, there was nothing left but a smoking skeleton of charred beams. They asked questions. I gave short answers. "Do you know who started it?" the fire marshal asked. "Yes," I said flatly. "And I've got proof." He raised a brow. "Want us to call the county sheriff?" I shook my head. "No. I'll handle it." Because here's the thing Karen didn't know, what no one in this quiet little HOA-controlled neighborhood knew. I wasn't just a farmer. My name is John Callahan. And for 15 years before I bought this land, I was a federal investigator, Department of Justice, Organized Crime Task Force. My specialty was breaking syndicates, dismantling empires built on arrogance and corruption. And Maple Hills? They had just made themselves my next case. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the lights off, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the room. The rain had started again, a steady hiss against the windows. I had the HOA bylaws pulled up. I had the county property maps. I had Karen's smiling face on the neighborhood Facebook page, bragging about improving community standards. Piece by piece, I started to build my file. It wasn't just my barn. In the last year, 3 other non-compliant properties had been forcibly brought to code. Fences removed. Garden sheds demolished. Every single one tied back to Karen's little clique on the HOA board. The pattern was obvious once you knew where to look. And so I dug deeper. Financial records. County permits. Even the HOA's tax filings. All of it public record if you knew where to look and how to make the right requests. By midnight, I had my first lead, a contractor named Rick Danner. His company got every demolition job in the neighborhood. Overbilled for them too. And guess whose brother-in-law he was? Karen's. I leaned back in my chair, a slow grin spreading across my face. This wasn't just petty neighborhood drama. This was fraud, racketeering, abuse of authority, exactly the kind of thing I used to put people in prison for. And I was just getting started. The next morning, Karen strutted into my driveway like she owned the place, clipboard under her arm again. "Morning, John," she said with a bright smile. "We'll need you to submit plans for a compliant outbuilding by next month or we'll start fining you daily. Oh, and your grass is 2 inches over regulation height." I stepped off the porch slowly, calmly, until we were standing just a few feet apart. "You made a mistake," I said quietly. Karen's smile faltered, just for a second. "Excuse me? You burned my barn. That was arson. And now you're trespassing. Now hold on." "No, you hold on." My voice was steel now. "You've been abusing your position for years, Karen. Kickbacks to your brother-in-law. Selective enforcement of bylaws. Intimidation tactics. And now felony property destruction." Her face went pale. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, but there was no confidence in it now. "Oh, I do." I stepped closer, lowering my voice until it was almost a growl. "I used to put people like you in prison. Federal prison. And I'm going to enjoy doing it again." For the first time since I'd moved here, Karen didn't have a comeback. She just turned on her heel and stormed back to her SUV, slamming the door so hard it rattled. I stood there and watched her go, the storm clouds rolling in behind her. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The storm rolled in that night like an omen. Lightning flared on the horizon, illuminating the wet cornfield where my barn used to stand. I sat on the porch with a black coffee in hand, watching the rain lash against the ground. Most people would have filed an insurance claim and let the county sheriff handle it. But I wasn't most people. Karen had turned this into a war, and war was my specialty. By sunrise, I was in town at the county records office, badge wallet tucked discreetly into my jacket. It wasn't an active badge anymore, I'd retired 2 years back, but it still opened doors when I needed it. People talk when they think you're one of them. The clerk was helpful enough once I explained what I was looking for: HOA board meeting minutes, property compliance complaints, demolition permits. She printed a stack of documents that looked thicker than a church directory. By mid-morning, I was back at my kitchen table, papers spread out like a battle map. It didn't take long for the rot to show. Half the board's complaints were filed against the same 5 homeowners, people on the outskirts of the neighborhood, older families who didn't have the money to fight back. Rick Danner's company was paid triple the going rate for demolition work, and somehow every job had emergency authorization signed by Karen herself. Fraud, conflict of interest, misuse of HOA funds on paper, it was almost too easy. But paper wasn't enough. I needed witnesses. My first stop was Earl Patterson, a retired mechanic whose shed had been bulldozed last fall. Earl's place was a half-mile down the road from mine, a little brick house with a yard full of rusting cars and half-finished projects. He met me on the porch, wiping grease off his hands with an old rag. "John," he said with a nod. "Heard about your barn. Damn shame." "Earl," I said, "I think we can do something about it." "About all of it." His eyes narrowed. "Go on." We sat at his kitchen table while I laid it all out: the bylaws, the financial records, the kickbacks. Earl listened in silence, jaw tightening. "They bulldozed my shed while I was at the hospital with my wife," he said finally. "Came home and half my tools were gone. Told me it was a code violation." "You willing to put that in writing?" I asked. Earl's gaze hardened. "Hell yes." By the end of the day, I had 3 sworn statements from 3 different neighbors, all telling the same story: harassment, intimidation, destruction of property. That night, I started drafting my report. Not for the HOA. Not for the county. For the U.S. Attorney's Office. 2 days later, Karen showed up again. Not with a clipboard this time, with backup. 3 HOA board members stood behind her like flunkies, rain jackets zipped up tight, faces smug. Karen had that same practiced smile, but I could see the tension around her eyes. "John," she said sweetly, "we need to have a civil conversation about your behavior." You've been spreading some very dangerous accusations online. I stepped down off the porch, slow and calm. I haven't posted anything online. Yet. Her smile twitched. This is harassment, one of the board members piped up. You're creating a hostile environment. I laughed, low and humorless. You burned my barn down. That was a board-approved action. Karen snapped. It was arson, I said flatly. And now it's part of a federal investigation. That got their attention. Karen's face went pale. What do you mean, federal? I didn't answer her. Instead, I pulled a manila folder from under my arm and held it up. Inside were copies of everything: financial records, sworn statements, photos of the fire. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm giving you a chance to step down quietly. Dissolve this board. Stop the harassment. Or I take this file to the feds and you spend the next 5 years fighting indictments. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain on the gravel. Then Karen's mask cracked. You can't threaten me, she hissed. Oh, that wasn't a threat, I said, my voice like ice. That was a promise. She turned on her heel and stomped back to her SUV, her little entourage following. As they drove away, I saw it in her face: fear. And fear makes people sloppy. The next week was a flurry of activity. Karen started sending out emergency HOA notices, fines, warnings, anything to paint me as the problem. But every move she made just added to my case file. Late one night, a black pickup truck rolled slow past my property line. I killed the lights and watched from the shadows. When the truck stopped near the edge of my field and someone stepped out with a gas can, I made my move. The man froze when he saw the beam of my flashlight. Rick Danner, I said. Put the can down. He did, slowly. Listen, man, this ain't what it looks like. It looks like attempted arson, I said, stepping closer. And I've got a camera on that fence post that just caught you in 4K. Rick swallowed hard. Here's the deal, I said. You tell me everything: who gave the order, where the money's going, or I make sure you're wearing orange by sunrise. Rick caved fast. By the time I let him go, I had everything I needed: dates, dollar amounts, even texts from Karen ordering the jobs. When I sat back down at my kitchen table that night, I felt it for the first time since this started: satisfaction. The board was cornered now. Chapter 3 would be the takedown. The sun was just rising when I drove into town, the manila folder riding shotgun on the seat beside me. It was heavy now, thick with sworn statements, photos, text messages, financial records. Everything Karen and her board had done was in there, chapter and verse, neatly indexed. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was calm. Focused. Because today, it ended. The Maple Hills HOA board met every second Saturday of the month in the community clubhouse, a fancy name for a rented hall next to the neighborhood pool. I'd been to those meetings before. Usually, they were an hour of power trips and gossip. Today was going to be different. When I walked in, the room went dead silent. Karen sat at the head of the table in her usual floral blouse, trying to look composed. But I could see it, the faint tremor in her hand as she adjusted her reading glasses, the way her jaw clenched when she saw me. Mr. Callahan, she said, voice tight. You're not on the agenda. I dropped the folder onto the table with a loud thunk. You might want to make room, I said. Karen glanced at the folder, then at me. You have 3 minutes to. No, I said, cutting her off. I'm not here to argue about grass length or mailbox paint. I'm here to put an end to this. I opened the folder and started laying out documents like a dealer spreading cards. Fraudulent demolition permits. HOA funds diverted to pay your brother-in-law's company at 3 times market rate. Evidence of intimidation and harassment against homeowners. And, let's not forget, I slid a glossy photo across the table: arson. Karen's face went white. Where did you get this? One of the board members stammered. I investigated, I said simply. It's what I used to do for a living. Federal Organized Crime Task Force. And you people? You're a two-bit racket with a Facebook group. The board erupted into a chorus of denials, excuses, half-hearted protests. Karen tried to shout over them, but her voice was shaking now. You can't prove any of this, she snapped. I smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. I already did. The U.S. Attorney's Office has a copy of everything in that folder. By now, they're drafting subpoenas. You should be expecting federal investigators by Monday. The room went silent again, colder this time. One of the board members, a nervous-looking guy named Mark Sanders, spoke up. Karen, is this true? Did you approve those payments? Karen glared at him. Don't you dare. But it was too late. The board was turning on her. This is fraud, another member said, backing away from the table. I'm not going to prison for this. You signed off on it too. Karen shouted, but her voice cracked halfway through. I gathered up my papers and slid them back into the folder. This board is finished, I said quietly. Dissolve it. Step down. And maybe you won't be wearing handcuffs when the feds get here. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Mark pushed his chair back and stood up. I motioned to dissolve the board, he said. The others followed one by one, like dominoes falling. Karen sat there frozen, hands clenched on the table, as the vote passed. And just like that, Maple Hills HOA was dead. I didn't wait around to watch the aftermath. I walked out into the cool morning air, breathing deep for what felt like the first time in weeks. But I wasn't done. 2 days later, the subpoenas went out. The FBI rolled into Maple Hills like clockwork, seizing records, interviewing board members. Karen was taken away in the back of a black SUV, her perfect hair a mess, her face pale and drawn. Word spread fast. By the end of the week, half the neighborhood had stopped by my property just to shake my hand. Earl brought me a case of beer and said he hadn't slept that well in a year. For the first time since I'd moved here, the place actually felt like a community. One evening, a month later, I stood on the edge of the field where my barn used to be. The grass was growing back now, soft and green. I had new plans drawn up for a bigger, better barn and steel frame this time, fireproof siding. The kind of thing that would last. I heard footsteps behind me. It was Earl, carrying 2 cold beers. He handed me one. Never thought I'd see the day, he said, looking out over the field. Neither did I admitted. He took a sip and grinned. Guess they learned not to mess with you. I looked out at the horizon, the setting sun painting the sky orange. No, I said quietly. They learned not to mess with us. Because this wasn't just about my barn anymore. It was about standing up, about not letting bullies hide behind bylaws and clipboards. And if anyone ever tried to start this war again, well, they'd know exactly what kind of man was waiting for them.